After a week-long break, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma are back in action this week with a pair of not-so-easy games against mid-major conference foes. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Bedlam Nation Conversation from the Dodge Sports Desk. I'm Deputy Sports Editor Mike Koehler, and joining me today, as always, are OU football beat writer Jake Trotter and OSU football beat writer Scott Wright. Today we're going to talk about Saturday's games against TCU and Troy. Jake, let's start with you. Remember back 2005, OU opened against TCU and lost at home at Owen Field, one of two home losses for Bob Stoops. This year, OU is better, but TCU is better also. They're ranked in the top 25. What do you think fans can expect on Saturday?
I think we can expect a low-scoring game. Both defenses are tremendous. TCU is number 1 in the country in yards allowed, number 6 in the country in scoring points allowed. They have the best rush defense in the country, so it's going to be a challenge for Oklahoma's offense. On the other side, Oklahoma is among the leaders in tackles for loss and sacks. They really get after the quarterback this year with Jeremy Bill and Austin English, Gerald McCoy in the middle. And TCU, I think, is going to have a lot of problems moving the ball. So I expect a low-scoring game. OU's been in a lot of high-scoring games over the first 3 weeks of the season, but I expect this one to be a little bit lower.
Something we're going to write about later in the week is this is really a game that OU needs, a good win over a good kind of mid-major foe. You know, Washington didn't kind of live up to the billing. Cincinnati, jury's still out on them. To talk about just how this win can impact OU.
Well, I think when we're talking national championship at the end of the year and who has the better wins and who has the best losses and all that and factors in the computer rankings, this could be a very good win for Oklahoma. Could be their best non-conference win because TCU has a chance to be a top 20 BCS standing team at the end of the year, provided that they beat BYU, which that game's in Fort Worth here in 3 weeks. So it's a chance to be a really quality win, which Oklahoma's going to need all they can, because if somebody comes out of the SEC undefeated, it's going to be very tight to see who plays for the national championship.
One thing you wrote about Wednesday was Sam Bradford and just kind of, how he continues to develop, how everybody saw him when he was really good, even early on at PC North. Talk about just how he's playing and how he comes into this game.
He's playing great. I mean, he's almost flawless in a lot of ways. Everything he throws, and what amazes me about him, everything he throws hits receivers in the chest, puts it perfectly almost every time. That's why he's completing, 79% of his passes. That's almost unheard of. So he's having a terrific season. This will be a challenge for him, though, because TCU, gives a new look. They run a 4-2-5 defense similar to what Bill Clay at Oklahoma State employed a few years ago. And they're very good against the run, so he's going to have to he might be in some 3rd and 8, 2nd and 9 situations where he's going to have to throw the ball downfield, and that's not going to be easy. But I think he'll rise to the occasion. And really, at this point, you have to think he's one of the top 3 in the Heisman short list, along with Chase Daniel from Missouri and Tim Tebow of Florida.
All right, thanks, Jake. We'll be back to talk about the OSU Cowboys after this message from Dodge. And we're back with the Bedlam Nation Conversation from the Dodge Sports Desk. OSU also faces a revenge game this week. Last year, OSU lost at Troy at the time when they were switching quarterbacks and there was some team instability. Now let's talk about how different this game is from last year. Scott, stability, we talked about this earlier in the week, is the buzzword at OSU.
Yeah, it really is. That's the one thing that the most important thing probably that Zach Robinson provided whenever he took over that starting job. He's also a little bit better player now. A little bit of a different look as far as the people that they're running out there. Kendall Hunter. This was the kind of his coming out party last year. Had 125 yards against Troy. He's really established himself as that feature back now. Troy is a talented team on both sides of the ball, putting up a lot of yards and really holding guys to very few yards on the other side. So it's going to be a tough game for Oklahoma State, probably a lot tougher than we expected coming in.
Talk a little bit about how the offense is developing. Des Bryant, who was such a star the first 2 games, was able to kind of take the last game off against Missouri State. But now they really go in, OSU really goes in with the spread offense that rivals what Troy had been able to do in years past. What do you expect from the offense on Saturday?
Well, this is really where their whole run-first philosophy is going to be tested. Troy hasn't allowed a 100-yard rusher in their last 5 games. They've only allowed 2 in the last 10 games. One of those was Noshawn Moreno from Georgia. So they're good against the run, only giving up 108 yards total on the ground per game this season. So that's going to be the first test for Oklahoma State offensively. And then if that doesn't go well, then Zach Robinson's arm is going to be tested next, and we're going to see how well he's progressed as a passer and what he can do, under some real pressure.
One of the big differences is that this week versus Troy is at Stillwater. Sunny skies expected last year. I mean, the place was a mess. They moved the game up, and it was still getting rained on. What do you think of OSU's home field advantage so far with the way the stadium is fixed now and how they can really jam some people in there?
It has a chance to really impact the game because of the offense that Troy runs, a lot of calls, a lot of checks at the line, things like that. So if they're able to get that place really loud, the way it's designed, it's going to hold the noise in, and it could really disrupt the things that Troy's trying to do with the offensive line of scrimmage.
All righty, thanks, Scott. We'll be back to talk about the BCS debate after this message from Dodge. And we're back with the Bedlam Nation conversation to talk about one of the hottest topics going, which conference champ could be left out of the BCS title game. Yes, we know it's early, but there's a good chance that USC could be undefeated, the SEC champ could be undefeated, and the Big 12 champ, maybe OU, maybe Missouri, could be undefeated as well. Somebody's going to be left out of the conversation for the title game. Guys, what do you think will happen, and who do you think could be the one on the outside looking in? Jake?
Well, I think it's too early to tell. Obviously, we're only 4 weeks into the season. But if that happens, I would say that the SEC champ is the one team that won't get left out, and it'll come down to USC in the Big 12. I think USC is probably going to be higher in the human polls, and that the Big 12 champ, whether that be Missouri, Oklahoma, even maybe Texas, they'll be higher in the computer ratings.
So So you don't think the weakness of the Pac-10 plays into that at all?
I think it will play.
Computers,
it will play into the computers. Now, if USC beats people 60-3 the rest of the year, they're not going to drop from number one. Mm-hmm. Now, if they go play Stanford and it's 31-30, and if they go play Arizona State and they need a field goal at the end and they don't have a lot of style points, they may slip in the human voter perception. But I think at this point, after the Ohio State win, it's tough to see them falling from number one if they continue to play that way throughout the season, regardless of who they're playing.
Scott, how do you figure all this?
I don't see any way that USC, if they win out, falls from number one in the human polls, but I don't see them having enough strength in the computer polls to hold one of the top two spots in the BCS. I think that the weakness of the Pac-10 is going to drag them down in the computers, and it's going to give those two, if there are a Big 12 and SEC undefeated team, both of those are going to have enough quality wins, enough points behind them in the computers to rise above USC, even if they're number one.
USC needs Notre Dame to win out, basically, up until that game. That would help.
But we can't assume an undefeated SEC team either. I mean, that's the chances of that, you've been saying all along, Jake, are pretty unlikely.
Well, I'd say Florida is the team. I think if there's a team that's going to go undefeated, and this game Saturday between Georgia and Alabama is going to eliminate one team, but LSU won arguably its toughest game of the year already by going to Auburn and winning. So they're still there. Florida, you look at their schedule, they beat Tennessee on the road. They don't have a tough road game the rest of the year. Everybody else comes to the Swamp. So they got a very good chance to get to the SEC championship game, at least unscathed. So I think the farther we get into it, the more and more likely it seems that there might be an undefeated SEC team.
And then in the Big 12, there could be two undefeated teams going into the Big 12 championship. There's a fairly good chance of that, don't you think, Scott?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is. You look at the way things set up for both Oklahoma and Missouri. I think that they both got, not an easy road, but a pretty favorable road to that Big 12 title game.
And Oklahoma more so than Missouri. Missouri's got to go to Austin. That's not going to be easy.
True.
All righty. We'll be back to wrap things up with predictions after this word from Dodge.
My all-new Dodge Journey took me from a 400-square-foot studio apartment.
Call Mario. Hello? Yo, man, I'm on my way.
To a new crib downtown.
Play memo.
Staff meeting, 9:30.
Now this house is mine. The higher you go, the sweeter the journey. Introducing the crossover that's ready for anything. The all-new Dodge Journey. If you can dream it, do it.
We'll wrap things up as we do every week with predictions. Jake, OU at home against TCU. What is your call?
Score, I'm going to go Oklahoma 28, TCU 10.
No more half-hundreds for the...
No, not this game. I think this game is going to be a little bit closer to the vest than we've seen. Now, Oklahoma could unload a little bit, but I think TCU is a good enough team to impose their game plan, and that's going to be to shorten the game, try to play really good defense, maybe get a couple cheap scores, and then just see what happens. But I do think OU will score 4 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. Scott, what do you think? At home against Troy, is this going to be a contest for OSU?
I think it'll be a little bit of a contest because Troy's offense is good enough to maybe keep up a little bit. I'm going with 38-28 in favor of the Cowboys. Right now, a 16 to 17 point favorite. I don't see them covering that.
Okay, thanks, guys. Be sure to keep up with all your OU and OSU news, including video highlights and analysis after Saturday's games, with the best coverage team in the state at newsok.com, newsok.tv, and every day in the Oklahoman.